QuickBooks Online 2025. Enter billable time, adding the billable time to an invoice and comparing and contrasting, applying that billable time to a job, otherwise known as a sub-customer versus a project. Get ready and some coffee because we're learning how to save time with QuickBooks Online 2025. Here we are in our QuickBooks Online Get Great Guitars 2025 Project 5. We set up in a prior presentation, opening up the major financial statement reports located on the left-hand side. We're in the standard reports within the favorites section. Right-click in that balance sheet to open a link in a new tab. Right-click in the profit and loss, also opening a link in a new tab. Let's tab to the middle, close the hamburger. We're in the modern view, so we're gonna select the drop down because I'd like to see a custom date range. Tab 010125 tab 013125 tab. It has refreshed automatically. Let's tab to the right, close the hamburger and repeat the process, selecting the drop down. Custom dates tab, going from 010125 tab 013125 tab. Once again, it has refreshed automatically. Now, in a prior presentation, we talked about setting up sub-customers, which could also be called jobs versus projects. And then we also talked about the idea of paying employees. This time, we're going to be talking about entering time into the system, not necessarily so that I can use that to pay employees, but so that I can then turn around and use that information to invoice a client, which is often done for a job cost type of system, a type of system often used in like construction, but also on service businesses such as CPA firms and law firms, meaning we might have a particular client and we want to then bill that client for multiple different jobs, which might take an extended amount of time. And therefore, we have to track that extended job. And we also have some revenue recognition concerns as we do that. Because the idea would be if I have a normal revenue recognition principle, I recognize the revenue when the work is done, when I provide the goods or services. But if it's a long job, you can make the argument that I should be basically recognizing revenue as I do the job, rather than waiting until the end of it due to the fact that it's a long job. So you have a different revenue recognition principle that could come into play. We have whole other courses or sections on that. We just want to get a concept of applying the billable items in this presentation. So let's go to the first tab. All right, let's do a quick recap here. If we go into our sales tab, then we have our customers on the right-hand side. We used to call this the customer center. If I close up the hamburger, it's possible for us to make these sub-customers. This is what we typically did in the QuickBooks desktop system. We called these jobs. You could also call them sub-customers here. And the idea would be, well, if I have Jones Guitars as a client and I do construction business or something like that, then I might have multiple jobs that I'm doing for that particular client. Or if I'm a law firm, that might be a client that gets into a lot of trouble, right? So they have a lot of different people that they're suing or getting sued by, and we need to have multiple jobs for that particular client to track so that we can bill out for those multiple jobs. Now, the other way that we can do this online for a job cost system, and the way that's more common, is typically if I hit the hamburger, is to use the projects function, which is available in the standard QuickBooks Online. If you have a cheaper version of QuickBooks Online, then you might be able to get away with still using the sub-customers or jobs, but won't have the projects, which is a little bit more advanced. Why would you need the projects? Oftentimes when you're trying to apply something out like payroll integrated within the QuickBooks system, it gets more complex, and that's where projects kind of shines, or one area at least. But we can go into the projects and we have a similar type of situation. The projects look a little bit more abstract because they're not in the customer center, but the projects are tied to the customers just like it was a job or a sub-customer. It's just that they're set up in a different set area or section. So that gives us, again, our ability to track this information by customer. So now the next step is, well, how are we going to, populate the job information into this system? Let's go into our flowchart over here. There's a couple ways that this could basically take place. This is a desktop homepage flowchart, but we're just using it for QuickBooks Online because we're looking at just the flow of the forms. So notice that we did payroll last time. So the idea on payroll, of course, is going to be that you're going to have to gather the information from the employee to process payroll, which might simply be the W-4 because you pay them on a salary basis, either weekly, semi-weekly, bi-weekly, or monthly typically, and then you just process the payroll. But you might have an hourly employee, in which case you need to gather their time somehow, which you might do internally within QuickBooks, or you could just have them fill out a timesheet, for example, to help us to then enter the number of hours to process their pay. So, but although most people think of entering the time as something needed to process the pay, more often or oftentimes people need it to enter the billable item. In other words, if I'm in a law firm or CPA firm, the general structure is usually in a partnership format where the owners are basically using the staff as a resource, a pooled resource for the partners, right? So that means that the partners are billing out the time that the staff is doing to their individual clients, oftentimes is the classical structure, right? So that means that they have to get the information from the staff, not so that they can process payroll. Even if they were contractors, we would still need to get the information from them so that we can turn around and add that to the invoice. So that's what we're thinking of now. And as we add it to the invoice, we might not be breaking out the invoice by customer per se, but rather by job, because that'll give us a little bit more detail in terms of what they're basically working on. So that's going to be the general idea. Now note that also, if you're in a job cost system, you might have expenses that you're going to record that you build your job on. So if I'm a construction person or I'm building something for someone like a fence, what would I do? I basically would say, hey, look, I'm gonna give you an estimate, and that's going to estimate how much I think it's going to cost, and then I'm going to basically track how much it actually costs, which is what I'm going to add to the invoice. So I can either take the estimate, create the invoice from the estimate, in which case you're locked into the estimate even if the actual cost is different, or I'm going to tell the client that's just an estimate. I'm going to show you exactly what I'm doing with the actual cost and see if there's any differences with the estimate. How do I pull the actual costs into the invoice? One way we might do that is when we buy things with check forms or expense forms, when money is going out, then I can have that billable functionality. I can make it billable and say that when I buy supplies, when I pay for gasoline for a particular job or something like that, then I'm going to pay for it myself, but make it billable, pulling it then into the invoice, making then an invoice from those billable items. And then my invoice is going to be structured so that I can show the client, look, this is what I paid for the project. Here's the supplies, here's the gasoline, and here's the billable time that I pulled in based on a rate for my staff. And then I'm going to give a markup of like 30%. And then I paid myself a 30% markup or something. That's the cost of us doing the job. And then basically that's how you might construct or focus or make your invoice. So that's going to be the general idea. So our idea is we're trying to make the invoice from the billable jobs, the time, billable time, and possibly then with the expenses so that we can bill the client, not just by client, but by project or job, assuming one client could have multiple projects or jobs. Okay. Now, before we jump into that, I'm going to make one adjustment on the payroll that we did last time. So I'm going to go in, and to do that, so I'm going to go to the profit and loss, and I'm going to go into the taxes area, and I'm going to drill down on that one. And then I'm going to adjust this one because I'm going to assume for my worksheet that there was a state tax. And the reason I'm doing this is to tie into my worksheet that I put together and my bank statements, basically. So I've added this, in essence, adjustment. So I'm just going to change it to 47424 to tie into my project. This is going to be 474.24 and debit and credit 474.24. So hopefully that doesn't mess anybody up too badly, but we'll make that adjustment so it can tie into again, our future points of our worksheet. And notice how easy it is to change something in QuickBooks, but be careful of doing that, especially if you're dealing with something in payroll, because if it was payroll and it went through the widget, then you want to be very careful. If you're entering payroll that was done by a third party that we're imagining in our practice problem, it might be okay to do this kind of adjustment if you entered it incorrectly. So in any case, let's save it and close it. And so then I'm going to go back. All right. So then now we have our 2 employees, and when I bill the client based on the timesheet. So let's say that they give us the timesheet, the employees are going to provide us with the timesheet in some way, shape, or form. What do I need to do in order to take that time and bill the client? Well, I need to know how much time they worked, but I also need to know what they worked on. So I need to know what job they worked on or project, and I need to know what they actually did. And then there's a question of how am I going to bill the client? Am I going to bill the client based on what they did? So if they're a bookkeeper, they might have, like if I have a CPA firm, did they do tax preparation? Did they do bookkeeping and so on? I'm going to break out my information by job, and then no matter who did it in the staff, I can bill the same rate by what they did, right? Or I can choose the staff basically and say, these are my best people or to least best people, and I'm going to give them an hourly rate. And I'm just going to say, this person worked on this particular project, and this is how much I charge for that person's time. In which case we might make an item per staff member and give them an hourly rate. So in my opinion, the first method would be better, meaning no matter who worked on it, I'm going to charge by what they did, what was the project, because that's a little bit more defined when you give it to a client. But sometimes you can't do that. Sometimes if you're in a law firm, you don't know what's going on. They're doing all kinds of things. I can't really piece out everything they're going to do individually. I'm going to charge by the person by hour. In our case, we're going to imagine they're guitar teachers or something. So we're going to charge by the popularity of the guitar teacher. So we're going to give them a rate themselves. So let's open up the hamburger and let's go down to, I'm once again in the sales, and I'm going to go into then the close. Let's close the hamburger, and I'm going to go into, I think they broke out. I'm going to open up the hamburger. I think they moved what was used to be in the sales tab, products and services, into its own tab. So again, this is the kind of thing, we're going to do this on the fly here. This is what I'm talking about with QuickBooks. I'm almost positive that this button was in the sales like a week ago, if not before that, right? And now it's down here. This is the kind of thing we have to kind of deal with QuickBooks, because they're always kind of adjusting the website. And that's why we make the course. I try to update it, periodically. So it's like, okay, they put that here. I see where you put it now. Let's go into that one. We got the products and services. And so I'm going to add a new product or service. And I'm just going to give it by the person who's working on it. So I'm going to say Adam Hamilton time rate. I probably spelled that wrong, but it's going to be a service item that we're going to do because for Adam. And then I'm going to say that the description, I'll just copy it. I'll just put the generic description. The price is going to be $100. So we're going to charge $100 per hour for Adam is the idea. And then what income account do we want to put it to? So I'm going to put it just simply into service income, but sometimes you might break it out. You might try to put out per line item the income from work, staff work or something like that if you wanted to. But generally I'll put it into one account because I could break out that added information if I need to with subledger reports typically. And then is it going to be a sales tax? I'm going to turn off the sales tax because I'm going to assume it's a service. So I'm going to say it's non-taxable for our purposes. That would be like a consumption tax. I don't purchase anything for it, so we're going to just save it like that. That looks good. Let's save it and close it. Boom. All right, so now we've got that line item that we could use. Now let's go into the time tab on the left-hand side, closing up the hamburger, noting that QuickBooks Online has some pretty fancy resources to track information of employees or possibly contractors that we can then use to pull in and create invoices for customers, possibly applied to sub-customers, otherwise known as jobs, or to projects. So we might have a whole nother course or section that kind of gets into this in more detail, because typically it's a specialized field, the specialized field of a job costing system, typically used in, say, construction, or sometimes in a service industry, like we say, for possibly larger types of CPA firms and law firms. So if that's an area of specialization for you, then again, that specialization is something that we want to think about as a bookkeeper and see if that's an area that we want to basically have more specialized knowledge in, increasing possibly our rates. So we'll just give a general idea of it here. Within the overview, you can see we have the supercharge your time, get ready to track time, manage projects, and so much more with QuickBooks Time. View your team's location. So again, this is getting pretty fancy that we're basically actually tracking the employees, so we can say if they're on a job, we might be able to audit that and actually verify that they're on the job. So it seems like the government could maybe Elon Musk is applying this to the government employees, so they can actually say, hey, wait a sec, you've been sitting on the couch all day. You tell me you've been out on the job, you know? So you need it sometimes if you can't really trust the employees, like with the federal government, right? So use the mobile app with GPS to see where workers are no matter where they roam. So manage time for projects, create tasks within projects, assign them to workers, and track time against them. So we can assign out the projects in our projects tool, which has some more advanced integrations than possibly with the jobs or sub-customers if you're using this functionality with the times. Track time from any device. Trust automated time tracking to keep your timesheets accurate and payroll painless. So obviously it would be nice if we can use other data input to track the time, possibly the employees being able to electronically input the time from any location, which used to be with a computer because they can upload it to the cloud, but possibly now these days, of course, tracking it actually with their phone, possibly even having a clock that they can turn on and off to help to track the time. So this could be a log up or an added feature that you might have to pay for if you want some more advanced functionality with the overview. And then we have the time tracking tab up top with the advanced information. So we won't go into much more detail than that. Our general idea is, whether they're employees or contractors, we want to make the time that they have billable. Therefore, we're going to have to receive their time, which you might just simply do with a worksheet, an Excel worksheet, if you didn't want to do this advanced time tracking, just saying, hey, look, tell me what job you worked on and what you did, right? Basically, I've worked in CPA firms, and some of them are more advanced than others, having software to do this kind of things, and some of them basically have a list of all the jobs, and you're just going to say, give me that information, because I'm going to use that information to create the invoices. So if I hit the ham boogie up top and I hit the plus button, we then could enter that time entry this way. So we have time entry, and so it says, first, let's add the team. Now note, this is where you're saying, where we have to say, we have to have basically employees set up in the system to be tracking the time entry in this fashion within the system. So that would mean that even if you have contractors that you're trying to bill the time on, for example, to add to the invoice, you might have to add them in essence as an employee, even though you might not be processing payroll, so that you can enter the time information for them. So I'm going to go ahead and say, okay, and then what if you want to track your own time? It says down here, what if I'm tracking my time that I'm adding to the invoice to help me bill the client on a job cost system? So you have to add yourself as an employee to track time. Your hours can be used for invoice projects and reports, right? So I'm going to go ahead and add an employee, and I'm just going to put our two employees, Adam, and then last name Hamilton email. He's going to need an email, so I'll say Adam at gmail.com, which I just made up, and it doesn't like that one. But it's because I put an and instead of an at, so I added an at. And then hire date, I'm just going to say it's the beginning of 2025, so that should be not messing anything up. So January 2025. And so let's go ahead and save that. And then it's someone else in QuickBooks has the same name. Customize this employee's display name. So I'm going to call it Adam Hamilton employee, or E, and save it. Okay. So now we have that one. All right. And so then we can add time. So now I'm going to add time going into Adam. So enter hours for each day, select the day, and enter the hours worked. You can also add start and end time. So I'm going to say, okay, that's great. All right. So first I have the custom up top. So this week, last week, I'm going to go to a custom date, and I'm going to bring it back to the first week of January. So I'm going to bring it back to the end of January. Now, as we process the time, then if we were in a job system, right, I might have the week would happen, and then maybe I do my billing, on Monday following the week. Let's do it on Saturday. I'm going to say the week is ending here. So we're going to go Sunday to Saturday, and then I might bill the client. But I might also just do it monthly, for example. It depends on the system we're setting up. Start time, I'm going to add a detailed worksheet. So I want to say, let's look at the detailed worksheet, and we have the duration. So let's enter this in. All right, now hold on. Before I go into this, I'm going to close this out. And I'm going to choose Monday. So I'm going to pick up Monday. So, and then I'm going to go into it and add the detailed time. And so then let's say the duration was 8 hours, and start end time. And then the customer that we're going to put this into is going to be, so I'm going to actually type it in here. I'm going to type project, and then it was project 2. I'm going to put it into project 2, which was tied to the customer of Sam the Guitar Man. So I'm going to put in the project 2, and then the service, we can either once again choose a service like that we did, or I'm going to bill the service by the item that we set up for Adam Hamilton's time. This is not what we pay Adam. This is what we're going to bill Adam at, which was that $100. And then I'm going to make it billable. So it's a billable. That means it's going to be able to pull it into an invoice, and then we can put notes down here if we need to put a note down here. So I'm going to say done on that one. So we've entered one for the Monday. Let's do one for Wednesday now. And I'm going to add details. And this one is going to be Adam, Wednesday, duration. Let's say it was another 8 hours. And then the customer this time is going to be, I'm going to put 3005. That's let's delete this, 3005 for the customer. So there it is, so Jones Guitars. Now this time it's a sub-customer or job, Jones Guitars being the parent. And so I'm going to put it in there. And then once again, I'm going to bill out for the rate that we gave Adam Hamilton. We're going to make it a billable. And we can add notes, and then I'm going to say, okay, so there we have it. So we've entered one in for the 6th and the 8th. Okay, so let's go ahead and save that. So, so 2 time entries were saved. So now I'm going to close it. So now the time should pull into the billable items now. So if I then go into my sales tab, and we can then go into the customers section, and then up top we have our filters, and you can see here in unbilled income, we have the 1,600. We go into that, and then we have the job 3005 and the project for Sam the Guitar Man, and then we can go into here and we have these items. Now, the fact that they're unbilled means that they haven't been included in the income statement, but they're being tracked in this section so that we could then turn around and make an invoice for them if we so choose. So the one that's actually in a project, we can also track by hitting the plus button and going down to the projects. And if I close up the hamburger, we had then what we used the one for Sam the Guitar Man, I believe, project 2. So notice nothing's happening in terms of the cost yet, but if I go into the time activity, there is the time that has been applied out to this particular project, which we can basically invoice out then by creating an invoice. So let's do that by let's go back up top and do that over here in the customer area. So I'm going to go back into the sales tab, closing the hamburger. We're in the customers section. We're in the unbilled items. I'm going to go into 3005, and then I can go into this time and convert to an invoice. So I can do it this way, convert that to an invoice, pulling it into the invoice, and then it automatically pulls in. But I could also, if I close this out, if I wanted to enter the invoice and then the job for whatever reason, I can hit the plus button, make a new invoice, and then I'm going to be invoicing the job of 3005. And then it'll pull over on the right side with the suggestion. There's the billable item, so we can pull that in. Now notice that oftentimes, if you're in a construction job or something like that, you might be pulling in multiple items that you had expenses for, supplies, plus the time, plus the gas, or whatever else you're using. But I'm just going to pull this in. We're going to say, okay, pull that in and close this out. So then we could tab through this billable item location. Okay, that looks good. And then I'm going to make the date 01/30/25, let's say. So there's the due date. Tab, 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 tab. And then it pulled in down here the item. So the item got pulled in because we set up the item for them, and then it's going to give us the 8 hours. That's what we entered into the timesheet. It would be nice if it pulled into the description that we told it to pull in for Adam Hamilton time. You might want to put that in there, Adam Hamilton time. But 8 hours, the rate is 100 times the 800. It's a service item, so we didn't apply any tax to it. And then this is an invoice now, so what is this going to do? It's going to increase the accounts receivable, the AR. The other side is going to go to revenue, which is going to be service revenue driven by the item here, and the sub-customer or the sub-account of accounts receivable will be impacted, and we'll be able to track the information by sub-customer. So let's go ahead, and we could save and send it or just save and close it. Let's save and close it, check it out. So then if I go into the products, or let's go into the balance sheet and then refresh it. So we're working with something refreshed, refresh this page, por favor. If I go into the A to the R, accounts receivable, we see Jones Guitars, there's the invoice. If I go into that, there is the $800 on the invoice. Okay, let's close that out and let's go back. Let's go to the income statement and then refresh it, refresh the page. And then on the invoice, we put it into service income going into that. And there's the 800 on the revenue side of things. That is good. Let's go back. And then if I go into my first tab, we can see in our customers section that we now have the invoice that is in place, has been converted, and the time here now shows that it has been converted. So also note that on the income statement, if I wanted to track the income by customer, I could select the drop down and say I want to, where they have a different layout, I forgot, display, and then I could say over here by customer, boom. And so now I can see my jobs broken out separately under the sub-customer. So now you have Jones Guitars, the jobs for Jones Guitars, and the total for Jones Guitars. Okay, so that looks good. Okay, so next time we'll do a similar process for the project. So we'll go into the projects and we'll build that out, but I'll also add an expense form that we can pull in as well to get an idea of what's gonna happen there. So let's stop it here for now. So let's see where we stand at this point in time. This is our income statement. So let's go ahead and bring it back to display for the totals. So I just cleared it. All right, so now we have the default of the totals. So I'm just gonna say, all right, that looks good. Display. Let's close up the hamburger. This is where we stand at this point in time on the income statement. Here's where we stand at this point in time on the balance sheet. And then let's open up the trusty trial balance. I'm gonna go to the tab to the left, open the hamburger, and we're gonna go to the reports. And then let's type in trial balance, boom. Close up the ham boogie, change the range, 010125 to 013125, run it to refresh it. So this is where we stand at this point in time. Balance sheet on top of the income statement. Balance sheet assets going from cash down to furniture and equipment accumulated depreciation. Liabilities going from accounts payable down to payroll liabilities. Equity going from opening balance equity down to the equity, owner's equity. And then the income statement starts at the income accounts, product income, service income, minus the expenses, which would give us the net income, remembering that that will close out annually automatically by QuickBooks. So if I ran this report for 2026, these accounts would be squished together into net income and be rolled into the owner's equity, the account equivalent to retained earnings if it was a corporation. And if your numbers tie out to these numbers, great. If not, try to increase the date range to encompass the current date you're working in. Drill down to the source document. If there's a number that changes, changing the date to somewhere between January 1st and January 31st. See if that fixes the problem. If not, at the end of this data entry for the month, we will then do some added detailed reports which might help us drill down on any problems.